Sarah Mitchell stared at the dinner table, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with the knife that lay untouched beside her plate. The spacious dining room of their Boston suburban home, usually filled with chatter and laughter, now echoed with uncomfortable silence. Her husband, James, sat at the opposite end, his gaze fixed on his phone, deliberately avoiding eye contact with everyone present. Their children, Emma and Ryan, exchanged nervous glances, pushing food around their plates without eating much. At 16, Emma was perceptive enough to sense that something significant was brewing beneath the surface of their parents' strained politeness. 13-year-old Ryan, while less attuned to the nuances, still felt the discomfort permeating their Sunday dinner. "Could you pass the salt?" Sarah asked, her voice unnaturally high-pitched. James reached for the salt shaker without looking up, sliding it across the polished oak table. "Thanks," she muttered, their fingers carefully avoiding contact during the exchange. Emma cleared her throat. "So, I got an A on my history project," she offered, attempting to break the suffocating silence. "That's wonderful, honey," Sarah responded with forced enthusiasm. James finally looked up from his phone. "Good job," he said flatly before returning his attention to the screen. Sarah's fork clattered against her plate. "Could you put your phone away during dinner? Is that too much to ask?" The edge in her voice made both children freeze. This wasn't the first time this conversation had happened, but something in their mother's tone suggested this might be different. James sighed dramatically before placing his phone face down on the table. "Happy now?" "Not particularly," Sarah replied, her voice quivering slightly. "I haven't been happy for quite some time, actually." Emma glanced at Ryan, who was studying his plate with sudden intensity. "Maybe we should go upstairs," she suggested quietly. "No," Sarah said firmly. "Maybe it's time we stop pretending everything is fine when it's clearly not." James crossed his arms. "Is this really necessary right now? In front of the kids? When would be a good time, James? You're either working, or glued to your phone, or out with clients. When exactly should we address the fact that we're barely a family anymore?" The accusation hung in the air. Emma reached under the table and squeezed Ryan's hand. Their father's frequent late nights and business dinners had become more common over the past 6 months, but neither child had dared to voice their concerns. "You're being ridiculous," James said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I'm supporting this family the best way I know how. By being absent. By missing Ryan's basketball championship. By forgetting our anniversary last month." Sarah's voice rose with each question. "That's your idea of support?" James stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "I don't need this right now. I have enough pressure at work without coming home to an interrogation." "Work," Sarah repeated, the word dripping with disbelief. "Is that what you call it when you were at Riverside Hotel last Tuesday? Because your colleague Mark called here looking for you, saying you'd missed an important meeting." The color drained from James's face. The children watched the exchange like spectators at a tennis match, heads turning from one parent to the other. "You're checking up on me now?" James asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I shouldn't have to," Sarah countered. "But when you lie about where you are, what am I supposed to think?" "Mom, Dad, please," Emma interjected, her voice small against the rising storm. Sarah's eyes softened momentarily as she looked at her daughter. "I'm sorry, sweetie, but sometimes adults need to have difficult conversations." "Then have them without us here," Ryan said suddenly, pushing back from the table. "Come on, Emma." The siblings retreated upstairs, the sound of their footsteps fading as they escaped the battlefield that had once been a loving home. Alone now, Sarah and James faced each other across the expanse of the dining table. 20 years of marriage stretched between them, from college sweethearts to parents to strangers inhabiting the same space. "Who is she?" Sarah asked quietly. James sank back into his chair, the fight seeming to drain out of him. "There's no one, Sarah. Don't insult me by lying again," she responded, tears welling in her eyes. "The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the weekend conferences, I'm not stupid." James ran a hand through his graying hair. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what I think." The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly, marking the passing seconds of their crumbling marriage. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering against the windows like nature's own commentary on the scene unfolding inside. "I've been having financial problems," James finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. The firm is struggling. I didn't want to worry you or the kids. Sarah stared at him, trying to reconcile this information with his behavior. Financial problems don't explain hotel stays or missed family events. I've been meeting with investors, trying to save the business. I didn't stay at any hotel. I was at a potential client's office until midnight, trying to secure a contract that could keep us afloat. He looked up, his eyes pleading. I missed the championship because I was begging the bank for an extension on our business loan. Why wouldn't you tell me this? Sarah asked, confusion replacing anger. We're supposed to be partners. James looked away, shame evident on his face. Because I failed, Sarah? The business my father built, that I promised to grow, I'm watching it crumble. How could I tell you that we might lose everything? Sarah absorbed this information, trying to determine if it was truth or another deception. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on her shoulders as she considered their future, whatever it might hold. Are we going to be okay? She asked, the question encompassing far more than their financial situation. James met her gaze, and for the first time in months, there was no barrier between them. I don't know, he answered honestly, but I should have told you sooner. I'm sorry. The admission hung between them, neither a resolution nor a dismissal, but perhaps the first truthful exchange they'd had in longer than either could remember. The breaking point had been reached, but whether it would shatter them completely or forge a new beginning remained to be seen. Emma couldn't sleep. The murmur of her parents' voices had continued well past midnight, rising and falling like waves against the shore of their family home. She sat cross-legged on her bed, the blue glow of her laptop illuminating her worried face as she tried to focus on homework instead of the argument downstairs. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Ryan stood in the doorway, his Patriots pajamas making him look younger than his 13 years. Can't sleep either? Emma asked, making room for him on the bed. Ryan shook his head, climbing up beside her. Do you think they're getting divorced? The question hung in the air, giving voice to the fear that had been growing in both their minds for months. I don't know, Emma answered honestly. Something's definitely wrong, but maybe they can work it out. Ryan pulled his knees to his chest. Dad said something about money problems. I heard him when I went down for water. Emma closed her laptop. Money problems? But we just went to Cape Cod last summer, and Dad bought that new car at Christmas. Maybe that's why they're having problems now, Ryan suggested. Because they spent too much before. The siblings sat in contemplative silence, trying to make sense of their shifting world. From downstairs came the sound of a door closing, not slammed in anger, but with a definitive click that somehow seemed worse. I'm going to check what's happening, Emma decided, swinging her legs off the bed. Don't, Ryan grabbed her arm. We'll just make it worse. Emma hesitated, then settled back down. You're probably right. The following morning, an uncomfortable normalcy had descended upon the Mitchell household. James left for work early, his goodbye kiss on Sarah's cheek brief but present, a performance of routine that felt hollow. Sarah packed lunches with mechanical efficiency, her smile not quite reaching her eyes when she handed them to her children. Is everything okay, Mom? Emma ventured as they were about to leave for school. Sarah paused, seeming to weigh her words carefully. Your father and I are working through some things, but you don't need to worry. We love you both very much. The rehearsed quality of the response did nothing to ease Emma's concerns, but she nodded and guided Ryan out the door before he could ask the questions clearly forming on his lips. At Thompson Middle School, Ryan found it impossible to concentrate. His math teacher, Mr. Donahue, had to call his name twice before he snapped back to attention. Sorry, sir, Ryan mumbled, aware of his classmates' curious stares. See me after class, please, Mr. Donahue said, not unkindly. When the bell rang, Ryan approached the teacher's desk with reluctance. Everything all right at home, Ryan? Mr. Donahue asked, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. You've been distracted lately. Ryan considered lying, but something in the teacher's genuine concern broke through his defenses. My parents were fighting last night. Dad said something about money problems. Mr. Donahue nodded thoughtfully. Many families face financial challenges, especially in this economy. But that doesn't mean things won't improve. I guess, Ryan replied, unconvinced. If you need someone to talk to, the school counselor is always available, Mr. Donahue offered. Ryan thanked him and hurried to his next class, the weight on his shoulders marginally lighter for having shared it. Across town at Lexington High School, Emma sat in the library during her free period, staring at her father's company website on her phone. Mitchell Consulting had been founded by her grandfather 30 years ago, providing financial services to small businesses across Massachusetts. James had taken over after his father's retirement, maintaining its reputation for integrity and personalized service. Nothing on the polished website suggested trouble, but Emma knew appearances could be deceiving. On impulse, she searched for news about the company, scrolling through local business publications until a headline caught her eye. Regional firms face pressure as national chains expand into Massachusetts markets. The article, dated 3 months ago, mentioned Mitchell Consulting as one of several local businesses feeling the squeeze from larger competitors offering cut-rate services. It wasn't definitive proof of her father's claims about financial problems, but it lent them credibility. Her research was interrupted by a notification, a text from her mother asking if she could pick up Ryan after school, as Sarah had a meeting she couldn't reschedule. The vagueness of the message piqued Emma's curiosity. When school ended, Emma found Ryan waiting by the main entrance, kicking at loose gravel with the toe of his sneaker. "Mom asked me to get you," she explained. "She has a meeting." Ryan frowned. "On a Tuesday afternoon? She never has meetings." "That's what I thought." Emma agreed as they began walking home. Something weird is definitely going on. Their route took them past Riverside Hotel, the very place their mother had accused their father of visiting. Emma slowed her pace, studying the gleaming facade. "Why are we stopping?" Ryan asked. Emma hesitated, then made a decision. "Let's go inside." "What?" "What? I want to find out if Dad was really here last week." Mom seemed pretty sure he was. Ryan looked alarmed. "We can't just ask them that." "We won't have to," Emma said with newfound determination. "Dad always uses his rewards card when he travels for work. He's obsessed with points. If he stayed here, they'll have a record of it." Before Ryan could protest further, Emma marched through the revolving door into the hotel's elegant lobby. He followed reluctantly, glancing around as if expecting their parents to materialize and catch them in the act. At the reception desk, Emma summoned her most mature voice. "Excuse me, my father may have left his laptop charger here last week." "James Mitchell? He would have checked in last Tuesday." The receptionist, a young woman with a professional smile, tapped at her computer. "I don't see any record of a James Mitchell staying with us recently." Emma's confidence wavered. "Could you check again? Maybe under Mitchell Consulting?" Another search, another negative result. "I'm sorry, there's no reservation under either name in the past month." Emma thanked her and retreated, processing this information as they exited the hotel. "So Mom was wrong?" Ryan asked once they were outside. "Or Dad lied about where he was, but it wasn't here," Emma replied, her mind racing with possibilities. As they turned onto their street, they spotted their mother's car pulling into the driveway. But instead of getting out immediately, Sarah remained inside, her head bowed. "Is she crying?" Ryan whispered. They approached cautiously. Through the windshield, they could see their mother, wiping her eyes before straightening her posture and reaching for her purse. When she emerged from the car, her red-rimmed eyes betrayed her attempt at composure. "Hi, kids," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "How was school?" "Fine," they answered in unison, exchanging glances. Sarah unlocked the front door, and they followed her inside. In the entryway, an envelope caught Emma's eye, official-looking, from a law firm she didn't recognize. Before she could get a closer look, Sarah scooped it up and tucked it into her purse. "Why don't you start on homework while I prepare dinner?" Sarah suggested with forced cheerfulness. Later that evening, as Emma passed her parents' bedroom, she overheard her mother on the phone, speaking in hushed tones. She caught fragments: consultation, options, and most alarmingly, divorce attorney. The floor seemed to shift beneath Emma's feet. Despite the tensions and arguments, despite all the signs, hearing the words spoken aloud made the possibility suddenly, terrifyingly real. Her family, imperfect but hers, was on the brink of fracturing beyond repair, and the hidden truths they were all keeping from one another were only accelerating the collapse. The Mitchell family moved like satellites in separate orbits throughout the week, carefully avoiding collision. James returned home late each evening, his shoulders stooped with invisible weight. Sarah maintained a brittle politeness that was somehow worse than anger. Ryan retreated into video games, while Emma obsessively gathered information, determined to understand what was happening to her family. On Friday afternoon, Emma made a decision. She waited until Ryan was engrossed in a game with headphones on, then knocked on the door of her mother's home office. "Can I talk to you?" she asked, hovering in the doorway. Sarah quickly minimized something on her computer screen. "Of course, honey. What's up?" Emma took a deep breath. "I heard you on the phone the other day. About a divorce attorney." The color drained from Sarah's face. She gestured for Emma to close the door and sit down. "You shouldn't have to worry about these things," Sarah began. "But I do worry," Emma interrupted. "We both do. You and Dad think you're protecting us by not talking about what's happening, but it's making everything worse." Sarah studied her daughter's face, seeing the determined set of her jaw, a mirror of her own expression when facing difficult situations. "You're right," she admitted after a long pause. "We haven't been fair to you and Ryan. I was considering consulting a lawyer, but I haven't made any decisions yet." "Because of Dad's money problems?" Emma pressed. Sarah looked surprised. "You know about that?" "Ryan overheard, and I did some research. His company is struggling because of bigger competitors, right?" Sarah nodded slowly. "That's part of it. But there's more to the situation than just business troubles." "Like what?" Emma asked, her heart racing. "Is Dad really having an affair?" "No," Sarah said firmly, then hesitated. "At least, I don't think so anymore. But he's been keeping secrets, making decisions that affect all of us without talking to me. That's not how a marriage should work." Emma considered this. "Did you check if he was at Riverside Hotel like you said at dinner?" Sarah looked startled. "How did you?" "Ryan and I went there," Emma admitted. "They said he wasn't registered as a guest." "You shouldn't have done that," Sarah said, but without real anger. "I called them too, after your father denied it. He was telling the truth about that, at least." "Then where was he? And why can't you just talk to each other instead of fighting or avoiding each other?" Sarah reached for Emma's hand. "Adult relationships are complicated, sweetheart. Sometimes people grow apart without meaning to." "That's not an answer," Emma said, pulling her hand away. "You're still doing it, treating us like we can't handle the truth." Before Sarah could respond, the front door opened and closed. James's voice called out, "Anyone home?" Sarah and Emma exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "In here," Sarah called back, her voice steady despite the tension evident in her posture. James appeared in the doorway, looking surprised to find them together. "Everything okay?" "No," Emma said bluntly. "Nothing's okay, and pretending won't make it better." James looked to Sarah, who nodded slightly. "Emma knows about the business problems, and she heard me on the phone with a lawyer." James closed his eyes briefly, absorbing this information. "I see. I think we should talk," Sarah said. "All of us, including Ryan. No more secrets." 20 minutes later, the Mitchell family gathered in the living room. Ryan sat beside Emma on the couch, while their parents took the armchairs opposite them. The formal arrangement felt like a business meeting or, worse, a tribunal. "Your mother and I have been having some difficulties," James began awkwardly. "We know that," Ryan said, rolling his eyes. "Everyone knows that." James nodded, accepting the rebuke. "Fair enough. What you don't know is that Mitchell Consulting is on the verge of bankruptcy. I've been trying to save it for months, taking meetings with potential investors, working late to cut costs, even selling some of our personal investments without telling your mother." Sarah's sharp intake of breath confirmed this was news to her as well. "What investments, James?" He couldn't meet her eyes. "The vacation property in Vermont. And your inheritance from your parents." The room went still. Sarah's parents had left her a modest sum when they passed, money she'd been saving for the children's college funds. "You sold my inheritance without asking me." Sarah's voice was dangerously quiet. "How could you?" "I was desperate," James admitted. "The business has been struggling for over a year. I kept thinking I could turn things around without worrying all of you." "That wasn't your decision to make alone," Sarah said, anger and hurt evident in every word. "I know that now," James replied. "I was wrong. I was trying to protect my pride more than our family, and I'm sorry." Emma looked between her parents, the pieces finally fitting together. "So there was no affair? Just money problems?" James looked genuinely shocked. "Affair? God, no. I've been at the office or meeting with financial advisors, trying to find a way out of this mess." "Then why did you miss all those family things?" Ryan asked. "My championship game was important to me." James's face crumpled with regret. "I had a meeting with the bank that day. They were threatening to call in our business loans, which would have meant immediate bankruptcy. I couldn't reschedule, but I should have." told you the truth instead of making excuses. Sarah leaned forward. Why didn't you just tell me what was happening, James? We could have faced it together. I was ashamed, he admitted, his voice breaking. My father built that business from nothing. I was supposed to be the one who took it to the next level, not the one who lost everything. The raw honesty in his voice seemed to shift something in the room's atmosphere. Sarah's expression softened slightly. We haven't lost everything, she said. We still have this house, our health, our children. And each other? James asked, the question tentative and hopeful. Sarah didn't answer immediately. I don't know, James. You betrayed my trust in a fundamental way, not by failing in business, but by shutting me out, by making decisions that affected all of us without my input. I know, he acknowledged. I wouldn't blame you for wanting a divorce after what I've done. Ryan gasped at the word being spoken so plainly. Emma reached for his hand. I don't know what I want yet, Sarah said carefully. But I do know that I'm tired of secrets and silence. Whatever happens next, we need to be honest with each other. I want that too, James said. Complete honesty from now on. Emma cleared her throat. So what happens now? With the business, with our family? James straightened his shoulders. I have a meeting on Monday with a larger firm that's interested in acquiring Mitchell Consulting. It would mean the end of our independence, but it would save the jobs of our employees and provide some financial stability for us. And after that? Ryan asked in a small voice. One day at a time, Sarah answered, looking directly at James. Your father and I need to have some long conversations about our future, but whatever we decide, you two will always be our priority. Do you still love each other? Ryan asked with the directness only a child could manage. The parents exchanged a long look, years of history passing between them. Yes, James said simply. I've made terrible mistakes, but I've never stopped loving your mother. Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Love isn't always enough, Ryan, but it's a place to start. The family sat together as the afternoon light faded, the walls of silence between them beginning to crumble. There were no easy answers, no guaranteed happy endings, but for the first time in months, they were facing their problems together in the open. As if by unspoken agreement, they ordered pizza for dinner and ate in the living room, talking hesitantly at first, then more freely about the future, about possibilities both difficult and hopeful. The path forward was uncertain, but they would walk it in the light of truth rather than the shadow of secrets. Later that night, Emma stood at her bedroom window, watching her parents sitting together on the back porch. They weren't touching, but they were talking, their profiles illuminated by the soft glow of the porch light. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a beginning, a confrontation that might ultimately lead to healing, whatever form that might take. Monday morning arrived with a gravity that James felt in his bones. He stood before the bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie with unsteady hands. The Thomas Financial Group headquarters in downtown Boston awaited him, a gleaming 40-story testament to corporate success that made his modest 3-story office building seem quaint by comparison. Let me, Sarah said, appearing in the doorway. She stepped forward, her fingers deftly correcting the knot he'd been struggling with. The simple gesture held echoes of countless mornings over their 20 years together. Thank you, he said, their eyes meeting briefly in the mirror. Good luck today, she offered, stepping back. Call me when you're done. He nodded, grateful for the olive branch. The weekend had been tense but civil, filled with practical discussions about their finances rather than deeper conversations about their marriage. Those would come later, after this immediate crisis was addressed. Downstairs, Emma was making breakfast for Ryan, scrambled eggs sizzling in the pan. Big day, Dad? She asked, her tone carefully neutral. Very big, he confirmed, accepting the mug of coffee she handed him. The meeting's at 10. Should know something by lunch. Ryan looked up from setting the table. If they buy your company, will you still work there? James considered the question. They've offered me a position as a regional director, overseeing the integration of our client portfolios. It's a good job, but it wouldn't be yours anymore. Emma finished for him, understanding in her eyes. Exactly. James had never discussed these aspects of his work with his children before. The transparency felt strange but necessary after everything that had happened. Sarah entered the kitchen, already dressed for her part-time job at the community college library. I called in sick today, she announced. I thought I might come with you to the meeting. James blinked in surprise. You don't have to do that. I know, Sarah said. But this affects all of us. I should be there. Emma and Ryan exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. We're going to be late for school, Emma said, gathering her backpack. Good luck, both of you. As the children left, an unexpected quiet descended upon the kitchen. Sarah poured herself coffee, leaning against the counter. This isn't just about the money, is it? She asked. This is about your father's legacy. James sank into a chair, suddenly overwhelmed. Dad started Mitchell Consulting with nothing but a desk in our basement and a rotary phone. He used to take me to client meetings when I was in high school, introducing me as the future of the company. His voice cracked slightly. How do I tell him I'm the one who lost it all? Sarah sat across from him. Have you spoken to him about what's happening? James shook his head. He and Mom are enjoying their retirement in Florida. I didn't want to worry them. James, Sarah said gently, you can't protect everyone from difficult realities. That's what got us into this mess in the first place. The truth of her words settled heavily between them. James checked his watch. We should go if we want to beat the traffic. The Thomas Financial Group occupied the top 10 floors of a building overlooking Boston Harbor. In the elevator, James and Sarah stood side by side, watching the floor numbers climb. His hand found hers just as they reached the 38th floor, a reflexive seeking of comfort that surprised them both. The reception area was all glass and brushed steel, with views of the harbor that took James's breath away. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, a polished receptionist, greeted them. Mr. Thomas is expecting you. They were led to a conference room where 3 men in expensive suits waited. Richard Thomas, the CEO, stepped forward with a practiced smile. James, good to see you again. And this must be Sarah? Introductions were made, coffee was offered, and the preliminary small talk dispensed with before they turned to business. We've reviewed your financials thoroughly. Thomas began, his tone sympathetic but clinical. The regional market has been challenging for firms your size. You've managed admirably under the circumstances. James nodded, keeping his expression neutral despite the condescension underlying the praise. Our offer is fair, Thomas continued, sliding a folder across the polished table. We'll absorb your client base, retain 60% of your staff, and offer you a 2-year contract as Regional Integration Director. Sarah reached for the folder before James could, opening it to review the terms. Her background in library science had given her a knack for quickly processing information. And the other 40% of the staff? She asked, looking up from the paperwork. Thomas seemed surprised by her question. Unfortunately, there would be redundancies. Severance packages would be provided, of course. These people have been with us for years, James said quietly. Some of them started with my father. Business is business, Thomas replied with a slight shrug. Integration requires efficiency. Sarah continued reviewing the documents, her finger tracing down the columns of figures. This valuation seems low based on your client acquisition projections. The man to Thomas's left, Peterson, the CFO, raised an eyebrow. The valuation reflects current market realities, Mrs. Mitchell. Given your company's financial position, I'd say it's more than generous. Is it? Sarah challenged, flipping to another page. You're projecting a 15% growth from our client base in the first year after acquisition. That suggests our portfolio is more valuable than this offer indicates. James looked at his wife with newfound admiration. While he'd been drowning in shame and worry, she'd been preparing for this meeting, educating herself on the financial aspects he'd previously kept from her. Peterson cleared his throat. The growth projection includes our marketing resources and expanded service offerings, which Mitchell Consulting currently lacks. Even so, Sarah persisted, you're essentially getting our client relationships built over 30 years, at a significant discount. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Thomas and his colleagues exchanged glances before Thomas leaned forward. What did you have in mind, Mrs. Mitchell? Sarah closed the folder. A revised valuation that reflects the true worth of these client relationships, and a commitment to retain at least 80% of the current staff for a minimum of 1 year, with priority placement for any positions that open up afterward. James watched the negotiation unfold, seeing his wife in an entirely new light. She was fighting for his father's legacy, for their employees, with a confidence he'd lost months ago. Thomas studied Sarah for a long moment before turning to James. Your wife drives a hard bargain, Mitchell. She does, James agreed, finding his voice again. And she's right. Thomas nodded slowly. We can revise the terms. Peterson, work with them on a more equitable arrangement. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. We still want Mitchell Consulting, James. Let's find a way to make this work for everyone. As they left the building an hour later, Sarah and James paused on the sidewalk, squinting in the midday sun. Thank you, James said simply. For coming today? For fighting when I couldn't. Sarah looked at him, her expression softening. We're still partners, James. Even with everything that's happened. Are we? He asked. Hope and uncertainty mingled in his voice. We're trying to be, she answered honestly. That's all I can promise right now. They walked toward the parking garage, not touching but close enough to feel each other's presence. The future remained uncertain, the marriage still fragile, but for the first time in months, James felt something like optimism stirring in his chest. As they drove home to tell the children about the meeting, Sarah looked out the window at the familiar streets of Boston passing by. We should call your parents, she said quietly. Tell them what's happening. James nodded, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. You're right. No more secrets. The weight of those words settled between them. A promise, a challenge, and perhaps the beginning of a new chapter for the Mitchell family. The Mitchell family gathered around their dining room table on a rainy Saturday morning, spreadsheets and financial statements scattered across the polished surface. 2 months had passed since the acquisition deal was finalized. The Thomas Financial Group had ultimately agreed to Sarah's terms, offering a more favorable valuation and guaranteeing positions for nearly all of Mitchell Consulting's employees. If we cut the vacation budget and reduce our monthly restaurant allowance, Emma said, tapping numbers into a calculator, we can put an extra $500 toward paying down the second mortgage. Ryan groaned, collapsing dramatically against his chair. Does this mean no summer camp at Lake Winnipesaukee? No, it means camp for 1 week instead of 2, Sarah clarified, reviewing Emma's calculations. We're adjusting, not canceling life. James admired his daughter's initiative. At 16, Emma had taken a surprisingly mature interest in the family's financial recovery plan. Her aptitude for numbers and practical solutions reminded him of his own father. The good news, James added, is that my salary at Thomas Financial is stable and the bonus structure is actually more generous than what I was paying myself at Mitchell Consulting. Then why are we cutting everything? Ryan asked, clearly struggling to understand the continued austerity. Sarah exchanged a glance with James before answering. Because we need to rebuild our savings, repay some debts, and start over on your college funds. The mention of college funds sobered the conversation. The children knew that their mother's inheritance, money meant for their education, had been among the assets their father had liquidated to keep the business afloat. I'm sorry, James said, not for the first time. I promise I'll replace every penny. Emma shrugged. I can get scholarships. My grades are good. Mine aren't, Ryan muttered, his adolescent face clouding with worry. Then we'll work on them, Sarah said firmly. And your father and I will handle the money part. That's our job, not yours. The family financial summit, as they'd taken to calling these meetings, continued for another hour before Ryan's patience expired completely. When he was excused to meet friends at the mall, Emma lingered, gathering the papers into neat stacks. You're good at this, James told her. The organization, the planning. Emma smiled slightly. Maybe I should be a financial advisor. Like your old man. James laughed, but there was a hint of melancholy in his voice. You're still a financial advisor, Dad, Emma pointed out. Just at a bigger company now. James nodded, though the distinction felt significant to him. There was a world of difference between being the owner of Mitchell Consulting and being an employee of Thomas Financial, regardless of his director title. After Emma left to study for midterms, Sarah and James found themselves alone in the dining room. These moments still carried a certain awkwardness, the easy comfort of their marriage not fully restored. I had coffee with Diane yesterday, Sarah said, referring to her closest friend. She asked if we're going to the Andersons' anniversary party next weekend. James looked up, surprised. Social events had fallen by the wayside during their marital crisis. Do you want to go? Sarah considered the question. I think it might be good for us. To be out together, doing normal things. Like a date. James asked, a tentative smile playing at his lips. Like two adults who are working on their marriage, Sarah clarified, but her tone was lighter than it would have been 2 months ago. They had been seeing a counselor, Dr. Abramson, whose office in Cambridge had become a familiar space for difficult conversations. The sessions were sometimes painful, often exhausting, but gradually productive. James had been forced to confront his patterns of secrecy and control, while Sarah examined her tendency to withdraw rather than confront problems directly. "I'd like that," James said. "The party, I mean." Sarah nodded, gathering her coffee mug as she stood. "I told Helen we'd bring a dessert. I was thinking about that chocolate raspberry cake from Rosie's bakery." "The one from our wedding?" James asked, memories flooding back. "Was it?" Sarah paused, genuinely not remembering. "I just know you like it." The small acknowledgement of his preference, that she still knew what he liked, still cared enough to consider it, felt more meaningful than any grand gesture could have. Later that afternoon, James sat on their back porch watching the spring rain drip from the gutters. His weekly call with his father was due in 10 minutes. These conversations had been difficult at first, weighted with James's sense of failure and his father's disappointed silence. But gradually, as with many things in the past months, they had improved. His phone rang precisely at 3. "Hi, Dad," he answered. "Jamie," his father's voice came through, using the childhood nickname that James pretended to dislike but secretly cherished. "How's everyone doing up there?" "We're managing," James replied, settling into the familiar rhythm of their conversation. "Emma's becoming quite the financial whiz. She's got us on a budget that would make Dave Ramsey proud." William Mitchell chuckled. "That girl takes after her grandfather." "How's work?" There was still a slight edge to this question, an unavoidable reminder of what had been lost. "It's going well, actually. I'm bringing in some new clients, and Thomas has been true to his word about giving me autonomy over the regional operations." "Good, good," William said. "Your mother wants to know if you're all still coming down for the 4th of July weekend." "We're planning on it," James confirmed. The annual Mitchell family reunion in Florida had been a tradition since his parents retired there 5 years ago. This year would be different, the first since the company changed hands, but it was important to maintain these connections, perhaps now more than ever. After ending the call, James found Sarah in their bedroom, sorting through her closet. "What are you doing?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Getting rid of things we don't need," she answered, adding another blouse to an already substantial donation pile. Dr. Abramson suggested focusing on the things we can control. James stepped into the room, surveying the organized chaos. "Need help?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "You can start with your side of the closet. Be ruthless." They worked in companionable silence for a while, the simple act of decluttering becoming oddly therapeutic. James came across an old tweed blazer he hadn't worn in years. "Remember this? From our trip to London." Sarah glanced over. "You wore that to that terrible Shakespeare play, the one where the actor knocked over the set piece during the death scene." "And we couldn't stop laughing," James finished, smiling at the memory. The people in the row ahead kept glaring at us. For a moment, they were transported back to that rainy evening in London, young and in love, finding hilarity in a disastrous performance. Then Sarah turned back to her task, the moment passing but not forgotten. As evening approached, the children emerged from their rooms, drawn by hunger and the smell of the chicken Sarah was roasting. The family gathered in the kitchen, falling into the easy routine of meal preparation. Ryan set the table while Emma made a salad. James uncorked a bottle of wine, pouring glasses for himself and Sarah. To continued rebuilding, he offered, raising his glass in a quiet toast meant only for her. Sarah clinked her glass against his. One day at a time. It wasn't perfect. The financial strain would continue for months, perhaps years. Their marriage remained a work in progress, trust being rebuilt conversation by conversation, action by action. But as they sat down to dinner as a family, the atmosphere was lighter than it had been in longer than any of them could remember. After the meal, as Ryan argued good-naturedly with Emma about whose turn it was to load the dishwasher, James caught Sarah's eye across the table. The look they shared contained everything words couldn't yet express. Acknowledgement of the pain they'd caused each other, appreciation for the effort they were both making, and the cautious hope that the foundation they were rebuilding might eventually be stronger than what had crumbled before. Autumn arrived in New England with its traditional splendor, painting the trees along the Mitchell's street in brilliant shades of crimson and gold. 8 months had passed since the family confrontation that had changed everything. 8 months of working through financial constraints. emotional wounds, and the slow, delicate process of rebuilding trust. Emma stood in front of Lexington High School, watching yellow buses disgorge students into the crisp morning air. Senior year. The thought both exhilarated and terrified her. College applications were due in just a few months, but her focus kept drifting to more immediate concerns, like the unopened envelope from her guidance counselor containing her SAT scores. "Just open it already," her friend Melissa urged, bouncing on her toes beside Emma's locker. "You probably aced it." Emma took a deep breath and tore the envelope. Her eyes widened as she scanned the results. "Well," Melissa demanded. 1510, Emma whispered, hardly believing the number. Melissa squealed and hugged her. "I told you. Harvard, here you come." Emma managed to smile, but her friend's enthusiasm only heightened her anxiety. Harvard had been the dream, but with their financial situation, even with a partial scholarship. "I need to call my parents," she said, pulling out her phone. Her mother answered on the third ring. "Emma, everything okay?" "My SAT scores came," Emma said, stepping away from the bustling hallway to find a quieter spot. 1510. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful." Sarah's genuine pride came through clearly. "Your father will be thrilled." Emma hesitated. "Mom, about college costs. We'll talk about it tonight," Sarah interrupted gently. "Your father has some ideas. Just enjoy this moment, okay? You've earned it." After hanging up, Emma stood still for a moment, processing. Her parents had been more open about finances lately, keeping her and Ryan informed without burdening them with adult concerns. It was a delicate balance they were still learning to navigate. Across town, Sarah closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair. Her small home office had become increasingly important over the past months as her part-time position at the library had evolved into something more substantial. What had started as a casual suggestion from her supervisor, "With your organizational skills, you should consider the Digital Archives project," had developed into a full-time role as the library's first digital resources coordinator. The promotion had come at the perfect time, providing not just additional income, but also a sense of purpose and identity separate from the family crisis. Sarah found herself genuinely excited about the work, particularly the community history digitization initiative she was spearheading. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. "Just heard from Emma. Incredible news. Dinner celebration tonight." Sarah smiled, typing back, "Absolutely. I'll pick up her favorite from Antonio's." These small, everyday exchanges still carried a hint of formality that hadn't existed before, but the underlying warmth was genuine. Their marriage had not magically healed. Dr. Abramson had warned them against expecting that, but they had established a new pattern of honest communication and mutual respect that served as a foundation for whatever might come next. At Thomas Financial Group, James sat in his corner office overlooking the harbor. The view still impressed him, though he sometimes missed the modest but familiar surroundings of Mitchell Consulting. His phone conference had ended early, giving him a rare, quiet moment to reflect. The transition had been smoother than expected professionally. His client relationships had transferred seamlessly, and he'd even brought in several new accounts that impressed the corporate leadership. Richard Thomas had taken to introducing him as the best acquisition we made last year, a compliment that James found both flattering and slightly uncomfortable. His administrative assistant, Tara, appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Peterson would like to see you when you have a moment," she said. James nodded. "Tell him I'll be right there." The CFO had become something of a mentor to James, helping him navigate the corporate politics that had never been an issue at his family's smaller firm. Their weekly check-ins had evolved from formal business reviews to more strategic discussions about the company's direction. "Mitchell," Peterson greeted him, gesturing to a chair. "How's the Westford portfolio coming along?" "Ahead of schedule," James replied. "We should have the transfers completed by next week." Peterson nodded approvingly. "Good, good. Listen, there's something I wanted to discuss with you." He leaned forward. "The Chicago office is looking for a new regional director. Thomas mentioned your name." James blinked in surprise. "Chicago? That would mean relocating." "It would," Peterson confirmed. "It's a significant promotion, of course. Larger team, better bonus structure, more autonomy. The kind of role that could lead to an executive position down the road." A year ago, James would have leapt at such an opportunity without hesitation. Now, he felt the weight of considerations beyond career advancement. "I appreciate the vote of confidence," he said carefully, but I need to discuss this with my family before giving any answer. Peterson nodded, seemingly unsurprised. Of course, take your time, but not too much time. They're hoping to make a decision by the end of the month. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and client calls, but the Chicago offer remained at the forefront of James's thoughts. By the time he pulled into the driveway that evening, he had rehearsed several ways to present the opportunity to Sarah. The house was filled with the rich aroma of Antonio's famous lasagna, Emma's favorite since childhood. Ryan was setting the table, and Sarah was arranging garlic bread in a basket. The simple domesticity of the scene gave James pause. How many family dinners would be sacrificed to late nights at a new office in an unfamiliar city? Dad, Emma appeared from the living room, her face glowing with excitement. Did Mom tell you? James swept his daughter into a hug. 1,510. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. That's incredible. Over dinner, the conversation revolved around Emma's achievement and the college possibilities it opened up. Ryan, now 14 and navigating the complex social hierarchy of freshman year, contributed occasional comments between enormous bites of lasagna. So, James said during a lull, I wanted to talk to all of you about something. He explained the Chicago offer, watching their reactions carefully. Ryan's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Move? To Chicago? The alarm in his voice was unmistakable. It would be a big change, James acknowledged. But it's also a significant opportunity. Sarah's expression was thoughtful rather than surprised. When would they need an answer? End of the month, James replied. I told Peterson I needed to discuss it. With you all first. Emma glanced between her parents. Would it be better for us? Financially, I mean. James nodded. The compensation package is substantially better, and with college expenses coming up. But what about my friends? Ryan protested. And my soccer team? Coach says I might make varsity next year. There are soccer teams in Chicago too, James pointed out gently. Sarah set down her glass. There's a lot to consider. Let's not make any decisions tonight. The conversation shifted to other topics, but the possibility of relocation hung in the air like a storm front. After dinner, as Ryan and Emma handled cleanup duty, Sarah motioned for James to join her on the back porch. The evening was cool but pleasant, the last of the day's sunlight filtering through the maple tree that dominated their small backyard. They sat side by side in the Adirondack chairs they'd purchased during their first year in the house. So, Sarah began, Chicago. James studied his hands. It's just an option at this point. I wanted to be transparent about it. Sarah smiled faintly at his choice of words. Transparency had become something of a touchstone in their recovering relationship. I appreciate that. What do you think? He asked, realizing he genuinely wanted her opinion, not just her approval. Sarah considered the question. I think it's a promising opportunity for your career. I also think uprooting the kids, especially with Emma starting college next year, would be challenging. And what about you? James pressed. Your new position at the library, the digital project you're passionate about. That's part of the equation, yes, Sarah acknowledged. But not the only part. They sat in silence for a moment, the question of their future hanging between them. Remember when we were first married? Sarah said finally. That tiny apartment in Somerville, with the leaky faucet and the neighbor who played saxophone at midnight. James chuckled. Mrs. Prentice downstairs used to hit her ceiling with a broom when we got too enthusiastic. Sarah laughed, the sound warm in the gathering twilight. We had nothing back then. A futon, some mismatched dishes, and student loan debt. But we were happy. We were, James agreed, understanding where she was leading. Because we had each other. Sarah turned to face him directly. These past months have been hard, James. Rebuilding trust, redefining our relationship, figuring out who we are now after everything that's happened. But I'm proud of the work we've done. I am too, he said softly. So whether it's Boston or Chicago or anywhere else, Sarah continued, what matters is that we make these decisions together with open eyes and honest hearts. James reached for her hand, and she let him take it. Together, he repeated, the word a promise and a question. Sarah's fingers tightened around his. Together. Inside the house, Emma watched her parents through the window, their silhouettes outlined against the fading light. She couldn't hear their words, but their posture, leaning toward each other, hands linked, told her enough. Are they going to make us move to Chicago? Ryan asked, appearing beside her at the sink. Emma shook her head. I don't know, but I think they'll make the right decision, whatever it is. How can you be sure? Ryan persisted. Emma thought about the past 8 months, the painful revelations, the difficult conversations, the gradual healing she'd witnessed. Because they're talking to each other, she said simply. Really talking. And that makes all the difference. Outside, as stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sarah and James continued their conversation, weighing options, sharing fears and hopes, sketching possible futures. Nothing was decided that night, but in the very act of discussion, open, honest, unafraid, they found something they had almost lost: partnership. Whether they ultimately chose Boston or Chicago, financial security or professional advancement, what mattered was that they would face the future as they had originally promised, for better or worse, together. In the challenges of the past year, they had rediscovered the foundation of their family. Not perfect, not unbreakable, but resilient enough to weather the storms that life inevitably brings. And in that realization lay the truest new beginning of all.